As their seats, just need our board members to... All right, good evening and welcome everyone. This meeting was called to order before our executive session at 6:30. The meeting is being recorded on ActonTV and will be broadcast on their website and YouTube channel. So welcome. I hope that you all had a restful Thanksgiving break. And for those who are counting, there are only 3 weeks until winter break. Just thought you'd like to hear that. I'd also like to wish all those who celebrate a happy Hanukkah. So first item on our agenda this evening is our ABRHS student representatives. And I see we have Dupree, Rohan, and is Molly here as well? Welcome, Molly is our newest rep. Come on up, guys.
All right, so I guess I'll start off today talking about Deepavali, the Indian holiday, and how I believe, and I believe many other students as well would agree with me, that it should be considered as one of the holidays that should be recognized by our school. So we should get a day off on that day. So as our community becomes more accepting, it is important to recognize the growing number of cultures and belief systems that are represented in the student body. According to demographic data from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, about half of the students in this district are people of color, with a third of them being Asian American or Pacific Islander Americans. Therefore, it's important that we recognize the existence of half of the population's culture and holiday by acknowledging these holidays in our school calendar. Now, I think that the school has already made some great progress by recognizing certain holidays, such as Deepavali, as no homework days and not giving tests on the days afterwards, and that certainly makes it a lot easier to celebrate those holidays. However, by giving time off for some holidays, such as Christmas, for example, and not others, it constitutes a form of unfairness that we need to remove by, for example, making Deepavali and many other holidays days off. And personally, Deepavali is not only a chance to get rid of this unfairness, but it's also a chance to teach students about different cultures. For me, Deepavali is about the triumph of light over darkness. And nowhere in our history has this been more present than right now as we battle this pandemic. Deepavali represents a strong human belief in the good of others, and most of all, it represents the hope that we all share that this world will get better. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to talk about social-emotional learning. On Tuesday, we had an advisory where we were introduced to the new anonymous reporting system for bullying and harassment, which I know was mandatory. I believe this aspect of social-emotional learning is very important, but it's not the whole story. Every day, many of us students struggle with the extreme pressure and stress we are put under. I don't see this being handled as an issue very well, and although it is very important to talk about bullying, we also need to mention other aspects of social-emotional learning that affect students on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
All right, as before mentioned, I'll be discussing the anonymous reporting system that was introduced to us at the advisory a couple days ago. There are obviously many concerns as to the implications of false reports or inhonest reports, or the responsibilities of those mentioned in reports. If a report describes a variety of students who witnessed the event being reported, then these people will be susceptible to the pressure of the administration to testify or to communicate what they saw, while the person doing the reporting will be under no such pressure. And there are concerns along these lines of the difference in protection of the reporter and the people in the report, and then also the concerns of false reports, as that can be a means of harassment. Other than this, though, there are obvious benefits to an anonymous reporting system as well. There are going to be a lot of instances where students do not make a report because of the absence of an anonymous reporting system. And in the instance where an anonymous report cannot be followed up on due to its anonymous nature, it is still better to have the report than to not have it. So much like any policy change, there's going to be pros and cons and hiccups. I'm looking forward to it, honestly. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing on the list. We also mentioned that during the advisory a couple days ago, our principal, Ms. Dean, mentioned that we are having an issue with school attendance. From what I hear, it's a handful of maybe 50 to 100 students who are repeatedly missing their classes, unless a broad, unconcentrated, or circumstance in the school. And then additionally, mentioned at our advisory a couple days ago was trash being littered throughout the school, and especially outside. An anecdote is right outside of Leary Field, right outside the path to the parking lot. The part of the parking lot facing the woods is strewn with trash because students will park their car facing the woods and throw their trash forward out of their window, and it's piling up and it's upsetting. But there are things like that where, unfortunately, some people do not respect our campus and or the people who share our campus. And then additionally, at our advisory, Principal Dean restated the need to wear masks properly, and I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rohan, Molly, and Dupree. Before we move into public participation, I believe John had a statement he wanted to make.
Thank you. During our discussion of the colonial mascot name, Evelyn commented that colonialism is part of the current politics of the Caribbean. I was reminded of this by Barbados' recent decision to become a republic and separate from the monarchy. This week, Sandra Mason was inaugurated as the first president of Barbados. Born in the working class district of St. Philip, Mason, now 72, credits Barbados' public education system for her stellar achievements. Education in Barbados is free, she said. You can achieve anything you want, and because of that, I felt it incumbent upon me to give something back. In her inaugural address, Mason said, "The time has come to fully leave our colonial past behind. Barbadians want a Barbadian head of state. This is the ultimate statement of confidence in who we are and what we are capable of achieving." In words that any community would find inspirational, she said, "For decades, we have had discourse and debates about the transition of Barbados to a republic. Today, debate and discourse have become action. Today, we set our compass to a new direction, girded by the successes of the last 55 years, buoyed by the confidence garnered from our triumphs and accomplishments, committed to country and each other, and motivated to press confidently and boldly forward for the sake of our nation and for present and future generations." Finally, she said, "As we celebrate all that is good in us as a people and travel onward, we must avoid the trap of merely reliving, retelling, and relying on our past achievements as a nation. Instead, we must seek to redefine our definition of self, of state, and of Barbados brand in a more complex, fractured, and turbulent world." I hope that we at AB will show that same resolve.
Thank you, John. All right, per policy BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, the public is asked to wait for that item. The committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. I would ask that speakers be respectful and civil. The Institute for Local Government defines civility this way. In the context of democratic debate, civility is about how people treat each other, civility involves the display of respect for those who have positions which one disagrees. Even though disagreement plays a necessary role in governance and politics, the issue is how one expresses that disagreement. The key is to focus on the strengths and weaknesses of the proposed solution to community problems, not to engage in personal attacks against those who favor different solutions. An even more powerful strategy is to listen for the concerns and values that underlie people's diverse perspectives and try to identify points of agreement and common ground. And with that, I'll open the floor to public comment.
Good evening. My name is Alyssa Nickel, and I live in Acton. A few members of our community continue to claim that supporters of the colonial mascot were silenced, that students who supported retaining the mascot were denied a speaking opportunity and were being bullied while adults looked the other way, and that ABRSC and the school committee created division in our community. I'd like to address these allegations tonight. Community input on the mascot retirement proposed by ABRSC was sought on September 24th, 2020. I quote, "The Acton Boxborough Regional School Committee is welcoming public comment as it considers a petition to retire the colonial as the official mascot of the district. We invite the public to submit comments in writing. We are interested in hearing a variety of opinions on changing the mascot to help make our deliberation more meaningful." This invitation was sent via email to the school community and alumni groups, and to the community at large via the Acton Boxborough Beacon, and posted to several Facebook pages with thousands of members. Mascot supporters were organized using email and social media, Save Our Colonial's Facebook page and Instagram, to urge the community to answer the call for input. Many of those who emailed from both sides of the issue thanked the school committee for the opportunity to provide feedback, for considering their comments, for emailing the student body to request a stop to the vitriol on social media. A counter petition was created and circulated widely. No request was made to present this petition for retaining the mascot, so no denial was possible, but the school committee was aware of it. The original wording of this petition, by the way, suggested that there was, quote, "never a genocide," and that Indigenous nations caused settler and tribal relations, quote, "to take a turn for the worst." When this racist language was called out, the petition was extensively revised. These events cannot be described as bullying. This is called being held accountable. A few students say that they were told by other students or staff that there was no need for them to contribute to the conversation. Yet the fact remains that the school committee gave a crystal clear invitation for all who wish to do so to share their views. Many chose not to. Our community was divided on the mascot issue for years before the unanimous vote to retire the colonial. ABRSC's petition and the school committee vote brought much more awareness of this existing division, but these events were not the cause. We must not continue to tolerate harassment of our elected officials with false claims of disenfranchisement. It is critical now that we move forward together as a community to support those engaged in the process of selecting a new mascot and participate in that process ourselves in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Carey, 11 Gusford Road. I actually just want to support the decision to retire the mascot as well. I wasn't involved in the process, but strangely enough, because I'm not aware of anything happening in this town, I was aware of the process when it was going on. This weekend, I actually listened to the October 2020 committee meeting, where I was impressed that you and the committee actually spent the time to work through the issue until you could come to a unanimous conclusion. That's really shocking, considering how evenly divided the town seems to be in terms of activity and action. And just to finish up, this fits my definition of what I want us to be doing, to be more inclusive and more fair to more people in this community. And I'm really proud that we've taken this step. So thank you.
Thank you.
Stella Coe, Gusford Road. Sorry. Thanks. In this season of gratitude, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our superintendent and school committee for their genuine and sincere conversations they had in consideration of retiring the AB mascot and the process they observed in coming to their decision. Even though my children have graduated from the AB school system, I find it very heartening that the school committee and superintendent are actively listening to students as they find their own voices and how they would like to be represented. I think the decision you made is truly reflective of the community that we are today. Thank you to the school committee for so graciously listening to the many points of view, even when people attacked you personally. Thank you for working to keep the record straight when inaccurate statements are made. I so appreciate that not one school committee member spoke about erasing our local history. Not one school committee member showed any disrespect for the rich history that the mascot, colonial mascot, represents. That all school committee members understood that retiring the mascot would cause some sadness in some of us, and that all school committees expressed appreciation and understanding that the school mascot should reflect the community. Thank you for acknowledging that representation matters in our school and community. I'm so happy to have had the chance to vote for many of you, because I live in Acton, so I can't vote in Boxborough. But thank you for all your work to make AB a more inclusive place for all its students and their families.
Thank you.
Hi there, Rebecca Wilson, Acton. I'm here tonight to speak in support of the school committee and Superintendent Peter Light. They have shown true leadership and bravery in taking on the thorny issue of the school mascot, and they have received quite a bit of backlash in the form of constant harassment, harassment as a result. Why? Because a small minority of alumni feel victimized by necessary change? School mascots do not exist to cater to the egos of alumni. Mascots exist to encourage unity and build up a team mentality within the student body. Mascots are supposed to be fun. Some students do not feel represented by a white colonial farmer. They do not have fun when they see his jeering image all around them while attending public school in this town. Is it at all appropriate for alumni to demand the mascot stay, even though the students are thus affected? I attended the Braver Angels debate, an olive branch extended to the pro-mascot group in order to hear the pro-mascot position. And afterwards, I'm left saying to myself, it's a school mascot. Why are some people so hung up on this? Why are they so aggrieved? They couldn't coherently explain it to anyone, including themselves. It only makes sense if we view this through the lens of white supremacy. On the heels of Thanksgiving, we find ourselves continuing to struggle with facing empirical truths. As a prominent conservative often says, facts don't care about your feelings. It might not feel good to be called in for perpetuating white supremacy, but it is important and necessary to have these discussions. If we cannot be honest and face difficult truths, how are we to keep our democracy healthy? It is not bullying to label bigotry. It is instead an opportunity to listen and grow. Make no mistake, this grievance is not about the process. Those who oppose replacing the colonial mascot have a deeper, more insidious grievance, one which no process could properly address. This is entirely about reactionary outrage that positive social progress is being made, that a symbol of white supremacy has been removed, their entitlement is being threatened, and so they lash out. Acton Boxborough is a changing community. The student body is increasingly non-white. When weighing the potential impact of a school mascot, shouldn't the current and future student body be of the utmost concern rather than alumni? As a parent and alumni, does my opinion matter? No, it really doesn't. I'm here to say simply that this should be the student's decision, and the superintendent has correctly laid out a framework for how to select a new mascot with this focus in mind. White supremacy is ignoring the voices and feelings of people of color and other marginalized groups and insisting that a symbol is being viewed incorrectly. I implore those who continue their quest to reinstate the mascot to stop. You lost. We might consider the re-election bid of John Benson to the select board as a referendum on the mascot issue, and he lost too. Democracy spoke. It's time to stop. Your behavior is divisive. Put your energy towards a fruitful purpose, one which would improve the lives of your fellow community members. This is nothing but a hateful waste of time. How do you want to be remembered? As someone who spoke up for progress and supported others, or as someone who stood for the bigoted and ahistorical past?
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi there, Kara Lafferty, Neshoba Road, Acton. Thank you very much for this committee for taking on this issue of the mascot and seeing that not all children were included and working hard to make sure that they were. I've empathized with the loss folks feel in the Save the Colonials movement, how they feel defensive of the colonial mascot because of maybe the sacrifices they had made to be a colonial and the pride they have for their contributions. But when we know better, we must do better. Any mascot a child cannot see him or herself in because of their skin color cannot stand. This stalemate is continuing to hurt the community. This decision takes nothing from the football or any other team. It isn't about you or me. It's about protecting children from a damaging perspective of going to school and seeing a mascot on the wall they could never be, because at that point in time, their race was largely enslaved. Every child will learn American history and the meaning of the word colonial. Let them learn the victories of our ancestors. Let them also learn of the inhumanity of that generation. I know the Save the Colonial group do not want to force children to endure the feeling of being excluded in school over a mascot that could never represent some, but are more sentimental of their own time as a colonial. Maybe there's a way to preserve the nostalgia and contributions of the Acton Boxborough colonials with a trophy case or something similar to memorialize the contributions to town history and likewise the passionate advocacy the community has shown. We can preserve the history of the people and accomplishments of the colonials without forcing future generations to carry on with a mascot we all know is not inclusive. Doing better now doesn't have to devalue what folks contributed as colonials. We can do better for the next generation to pass through our school, one that is more diverse than ever, while working constructively with the impassioned group to build an appropriate place to memorialize the colonials as a mascot. This destructive stalemate has to end. Let's live the values of our school, equity, engagement, and work together to respectfully preserve the contributions that came before us while creating space for all children to excel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Seeing as comments were made with regards to the mascot, I will again just remind everybody that in regards to the topic of the school mascot, this was a decision that the committee made last October to retire the colonial as the school mascot, and it was made unanimously by the school committee as a matter under our purview. This decision was made by the committee following our open process, including listening, seeking input, researching, weighing multiple perspectives, carefully considering stakeholders with differing opinions, and finally discussing and deciding as a committee to retire the mascot. Now's the time for the school body to begin their process of choosing a new mascot. In making this decision, we have followed our school committee operating protocols, specifically working to support the educational welfare and well-being of all students in a positive district climate and culture, prioritizing student needs and interests above all else, and working actively to create an anti-racist community to respect the increasing diversity of our community. It is our hope that members of this community will act with inclusivity, understanding, and compassion in this and all other matters. And now we move on to the superintendent's update. Peter.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Adam. Couple of quick updates for you. We're going to share a couple of videos out with the community, and we'll share them with you as well. As you know, we've been working with ActonTV over the course of this year, and Andrew Shen, in his role as Director of Special Projects, has worked on a program called AB Connects, which is actually a year-long initiative to feature some different aspects of the district and make sure we can get word out to the broader community about things that are going on in our schools. So in the first episode, that was kind of my introduction to the show and what we were trying to do. Our second episode actually features a walkthrough of the building project and is hosted by the project architect, Emily Grandstaff Rice, who, if you were around during the original process when we were designing the building, she was the lead architect on that. So she did a walkthrough of the current status of the building. That's being pushed out now, and we're going to share it with families. It's also going to be featured on ActonTV. And the second video we have is really exciting to me. We had some of our Acton Boxborough students featured in partnership with, it was NLX, which is an energy storage and demand response at the Acton Boxborough High School. If you were paying attention to committee matters or on the committee several years ago, we were working on a Tesla battery storage array that could actually store energy produced from the grid and use it at off-peak hours. So that during peak hours, we could use the battery energy instead of electricity. So that battery array, after some COVID-related delays, has now been installed and up and running. The company was doing a promotional video and actually chose to feature some of our students who had worked on elements of the project with them. So that is also going out to our community as well. Principal searches are underway right now. So as you may be aware, we're going to again have several openings at our schools this year for new principals. This includes the Conant and Gates elementary schools, as well as the junior high school. Conant and the junior high school have been led this year by interim principals. Abigail Dressler is at Conant and Jim Marcotte is at the junior high school. And we had planned, even as of almost a year ago now, that those searches would be taking place this year. In addition, though, Lynn Newman, who's been a longtime principal of the Gates Elementary School, has shared with her school community that she's retiring at the end of this year. So we're also going to be conducting a search there. Because we had 2 elementary principal openings at the same time, we chose to post those positions at the same time so that candidates knew that there were options. So Marie has already started working with a screening committee to get those searches up and running. The positions for the 2 elementary positions have been posted, and those processes are now beginning, and Marie's starting to meet with the screening teams. Once we get into those processes, then we're going to look at the junior high school. So that's kind of the next step along the way. So that is underway. I will keep you updated as we go through those processes. As you remember, school committee members are traditionally not part of the original search team. However, what I do ask you to do, we open up the forums for all of our community. And if you have input that you'd like to send, you can send that directly to me as we get into that part of the process. Public health update. So, over the last couple of weeks, the 7-day average in Massachusetts has risen significantly to 1,972 cases as the daily average for 7 days. And as reported by the state, the incidence rate in Acton is currently 22.3, which is up from 8.1 2 weeks ago. That's a significant change as well. Boxborough is actually up slightly from 2 weeks ago, but it's actually consistent with a month ago at 15.5. Anecdotally, we meet every week with the Acton nursing staff as well as our nursing staff and our school physician. And Acton is managing just about 50 cases right now, which is right about the same as the peak of any point in the pandemic for active cases in Acton. I followed up with a question saying, do you track hospitalizations? And they said, we don't have formal data, but none of the cases that they were aware of have resulted in any serious medical concerns that would cause hospitalization. So I think that's a sign that we're kind of entering this new phase of the pandemic where we're going to continue to see cases. But the incidence rate of serious complications has so diminished that we have to think a little bit differently about what we're going to be doing and managing. So I just want to get that out there and talk a little bit about that. In our schools specifically, we've seen about 15 positive cases. Actually, I wrote that this morning, and we've seen a couple more over the course of the day today, so I don't know what the exact number is for 2 weeks, but it's probably around 17 or 18 total cases, Dawn. Does that sound about right?
No, I think we're at
16. Okay, that's better than I assumed, so that's good. So about 16 total cases and students and staff over the last 2 weeks, which is a total of 92 cases in the year. And that does include the Thanksgiving break reporting. So I just want to be clear about that. We also have all of that information on our COVID-19 website. I'm very, very excited to share some vaccination numbers with you for our elementary schools. I'm not going to even bother with the secondary schools because combined they're right at about 90% for students. At Blanchard, we're at about 68% vaccination rate for students having received their first shot, or at least their first shot. At Conant, it's 66%, Douglas, 69%, Gates, 65%, McCarthy Town, 73%, and Miriam is 77%, having received at least their first shot. So that is absolutely fantastic and very, very exciting. I again want to thank all of our nurses. I want to thank Dawn. I want to thank the town of Acton and its nursing staff as well for the clinics that we were able to host. We have our second shot clinics coming up beginning this weekend and next week. And about 2 weeks after that, students will have reached that peak vaccination point. So once we hit the new year, we're going to be in really, really good shape. And I'm fascinated to see what happens to our case counts because we know at our high school and junior high, the case counts have been significantly lower this year than in our elementary schools. So kudos to everyone participating in those clinics. COVID protocols, just an update on that. I gave an extensive update last time about some of our thinking. We're going to keep circulating that with families so people know where our thinking is. One change we are letting people know of that's taking place now, we're at that point where we need to balance some of the educational needs of our students with some of our COVID protocols. One thing we're finding is that different students need different types of support at different times. One thing we had stopped doing during the pandemic was allowing students to be grouped together across classrooms. We need to be starting that again. So we will allow students to be grouped across classrooms. That does not increase the likelihood of exposure to a COVID case. All it does is make our thinking around the contact tracing process a little bit more complex. So our schools know this, they're prepared for that. You know, we keep track of any different student groupings that happen during the day, but we do have to start grouping students for some of the educational needs that they have. And then DEI Family Advisory. Dawn, do you want to give a little bit of update on DEI Family Advisory and the LPAC?
Sure.
Dawn wrote it. I was going to read it, so we'll test your memory.
So our DEI Family Advisory met on, I think, November 23rd for our first meeting of the year. We spent time looking at, well, we spent time together with Dernisa Amante Jackson, who's one of my heroes, and learned a little bit more about some sort of diversity, belonging, inclusion, equity as sort of the way to ultimately get to equity. And there's a link, I think, in your, actually I need to put a link in your update so other people can see it. I know the video was very well received. It's one of my favorites. And we also talked a little bit about the how we're going to respond to incidents of hate and bias in our schools, and sought feedback from this particular group from that. That's also gone out to all of our student and staff affinity groups as well. And so, and I'll be reporting back to you, I think, in early January with sort of the final version of that, walking you through it. And then our next month's meeting for the Family DEI, Deb and I will be sharing back with them information from a curriculum survey that we did, and sort of getting some thoughts from them about their, you know, what they'd like to see the district do in terms of next steps to continue to expand the way that we're teaching in our classrooms and the things that we're doing. And our LPAC met for the second time on Tuesday night this week, and it was simultaneously interpreted in Chinese and Portuguese, which were the requests. And we invited Andrew Shen in to do a quick update on the Remind app. I don't know if any of your students, teachers are using it, but it's a fantastic way to be able to sort of text with families without actually sharing out cell phone numbers, especially on personal devices. And so we taught them how to use that, and then did some work with the parent portal. I know that's been a source of frustration for some families, even though we translate it and there's lots of instruction out there. It can be really overwhelming to set that up. So walk them through that process a little bit. So it's a great group, and I'm excited about the work.
Thanks, Dawn. And, you know, just as Dawn mentioned the Remind app for some of the LPAC, it made me think another project that Andrew Shen has been working on with Marie is actually to develop a recruitment video so that we can recruit educators with a particular focus on educators of color. And so we are working right now to develop kind of the storyboard for that, and really including a lot of student voice behind the reason why we need a more diverse educator workforce. And so that will be coming out, and we intend to use that through the recruiting process this spring as we think about candidates. We have protocols for inclement weather posted to our website. We just want to make sure everyone's aware of those. It is getting to that season, although with 50 degrees and rain, it may not feel like it. And then Adam and I are hosting our next coffee with the superintendent and school committee chair on December 15th at 8:30 a.m., and that is via Zoom. And we are sending the link out for folks to be able to submit questions ahead of time tomorrow. So that's it for me, so thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Questions? Evelyn?
Thank you, Peter. I have a question and a comment. And so we have a number of roles open, and I know you just referenced that there's a video on recruitment that's going to involve kids of color and, you know, diverse kids, so we can attract. Where else, what other efforts are we putting in place to be able to recruit staff of color? Are we using any DEI sites? What intentional strategies are we putting forward to be able to bring diverse staff into the district? And we have gates open, Conan, and then the junior high is going to be open. Those are 3 roles. I just want to understand what we're doing and how the school committee can be helpful to be able to advance that agenda. That's 1. 2, I think Dawn is doing a fantastic job in the space of DEI, but I think that as a district, if we want to be serious about this work, we need to commit some money in hiring somebody full-time to help us get there. I mean, Dawn, you know, with much appreciation to you, is wearing several hats. She's doing so much. And DEI in itself is a big bucket. And anytime that she reports on this, I can't help but think how much pressure we putting on her to be able to deal with this, in addition to everything else that she's doing. And I know Dave will tell me we don't have money, but if this is something that is near and dear to our hearts and we really want to get somewhere with DEI, we have to find the money to be able. We have to.
Turn the volume down on their desktop units. I think it's this one.
Sorry about that. It's still echoing, right? So we need to find the dollars to be able to do that. And I want us to do it right. And I know that we're just trying to put a Band-Aid on this to be able to get somewhere, but for a long-term strategy, we should start thinking about how we want to do this right. Thank you.
Sure. So, Marie, I don't know if you want to talk to recruitment efforts?
Yeah, and we'll come back in, a couple of months and give you a more detailed report on this, but we have subscribed to an organization called HBCU Careers, and we found a group that actually has school districts as clients. Often some of this work is geared toward different industries, and they are going to host for us a virtual job fair tied to our HBCUs across the country. And our hope is to meet candidates through that process and then be able to bring them up here to show them our district and, really help make it attractive to come to work here. So that's one process that we're working with. We already have another job fair or 2 that are dedicated to candidates of color. We're doing anti-bias training with all of our search committees and doing our best to recruit candidates of color in ways that we haven't before. So we'll come back and report more to you, a more comprehensive list, but we're certainly mindful and working toward these goals.
I think that we need to set some goals and say that we want to bring at least out of these 3 open roles, we want to at least recruit 1 diverse candidate. We need to set some goals. I feel sometimes like, yeah, we're making all the effort, but we're not setting the goals. And when we don't set the goals intentionally, we can't get to where we want to get to.
No, I was just going to say that, I think we've talked about this many times, that there's a huge pipeline problem. We're not the only school district who's eager to recruit candidates of color. Everybody's engaging in these efforts. So it's not as if there's a multitude of candidates out there who are qualified. So I just think that that's jumping the gun to do that. I think if we didn't have any applicants who were qualified, I don't think that.
I would disagree because I've had the same thing said in my institution that we can find doctors of color. And guess what? When we made the effort to go out and find them, we did. So I think we have to make a commitment. When we say there is not a pool out there and they just are not there for us to recruit, that's, to me, is a defeatist attitude. we have already given up. So we're not gonna find them, we won't hire them. If we say we have a commitment to do that, we will go out and we'll find them because they're there. I hear this every day at Mass General. Every day. We can find black physicians. All of a sudden, we hire 2 presidents. So they're there. We need to find them and bring them in. Something has to entice them to come forward. That's what we're not doing.
Any other questions for Peter on his update? Okay, thank you, Peter. Next item on our agenda is a budget introduction and context from Dave. I know we've got at least one piece of multimedia that will get shown on the screen for this. Yeah. For those in the audience, if you turn around, there's a big screen behind you too. That might be easier of an eye chart to see than the one that's behind me.
I just asked Beth if this is something that I'm going to be able to manipulate and focus in on things, and I don't think I can.
PDF of the packet.
Dave, if you hold the plus, see the plus and minus at the top?
Oh, right there? Up there.
There we go. And there's also a copy of this in the packet this evening for every one of us who has a device in front of
Then
us.
you can do the, grab it up and down the side.
Okay. This is one page. It's a, Peter came up with the word dashboard, so I dutifully put that in the title. And what we're trying to do is to get a handle on the big picture. In other words, as a boss of mine used to say, tell me the answer. Well, this isn't the final answer, but it's the preliminary answer of where we think the budget, the direction of the budget is taking us. This analysis, I made a slight revision in the grouping of the items 1 through 12 that you see has been discussed with the senior leadership team and also with budget subcommittee. I'll walk you through it pretty quickly. I think it's fairly logical and concisely laid out. Others may disagree. What I tried to do is to show where does the budget start? What are the things that are going to provide us more resources to fund operations in FY23? And so you see items A through E. The first 3 in blue are revenues. They're outside sources. So state aid, we expect our $30 per pupil minimum aid. Transportation aid has happily seems to be settling on a 95% reimbursement. That will allow us to adjust our budget metric to that level from a lot more conservative number that we've used in the past. And remember, the operative number now was the FY22 budget, which was developed a year ago before the FY21 reimbursement was up to 95%. So we're catching up in a good way on transportation aid. We're catching up in a bad way on what I call other revenues, which are investment income. Anybody with a bank account knows that you need a microscope to see your investment earnings. And Medicaid, which has trended downward in the last few years. So those things combined will impact the budget and give us, in 2 cases, more resources next year, and in 1, less resources next year for budgeting purposes. The next one is a little bit trickier to explain. We used 3 different sets of reserves in setting the FY22 budget. We used $1,245,000, an all-time record of E&D reserve. In addition, we dedicated $200,000 and $150,000 respectively from a transportation reserve, which we established last year, and the capital stabilization reserve, which was established several years ago. What we've put in the budget guidelines is to try and reduce the need for reserves. This reduction of 435,000 brings the total amount of reserves to still a little bit over $1 million. It's a number, it's an arbitrary, if you will, starting point. And as John has rightly said to me and to the committee, reserves, you can't just simply look at the reserve amount in isolation. There needs to be some acknowledgement of its replenishment and what exactly it's doing in the scheme of funding. To wit, the last item on there is the assessment. So when we set a budget and we know how much we're going to take in outside revenues and we know how much we're going to use from our own reserves, what's left that needs to be funded is what's assessed to the two towns. And that default amount at this point is another 3.3 million, or a total assessment increase of 4.15%. That's what I have put in the ALG model documents. I'm having a hard time scrolling here. Sorry. And so again, it's a starting point. What that does, because of the ever-shifting enrollment proportion between Acton and Boxborough, is the starting point with these numbers. The increase to the Acton assessment would be 3.52%, and the increase to the Boxborough assessment would be 7.52%. 3.5% and 7.5% respectively. And there you see, based on historical enrollment trends, what the relative shares are. And Boxborough at 16.3% is significantly higher than just 5 years ago when I started, when I think it was in the 14s. So that trend, as you've seen from me previously, and no doubt you will see from me again during the main budget presentation, if we take the enrollment projections from NESDEC and trend them out over 5 years or so, this will continue. This trend will continue, and that 16.3% is anticipated to go higher than that still. So that box just summarizes everything. What you'll see out of the box, we're assuming a 3.25% increase to the operating appropriation. It's a 3.15% increase in the total appropriation because things like debt service and capital consume a smaller increase of the budget from year to year. Those are relatively fixed costs. The change in available revenue, only a modest, little over 1% increase, mostly that transportation aid that I told you. In reserve usage, if we are going to stay true to the budget guideline of reducing reserves, that number will be negative. How much of a negative? That will depend on, where we go in the process and what the needs are to come to an assessment number that is palatable, numbers that are palatable to the two towns. I'll stop there for questions. That's the sources side. The next piece will be what we're going to do with the money. Okay? Excuse me a second. And so with $3,143,000 of new money, oh my, this could be trouble.
I'm making people sick.
Oh, wrong way?
All right, we're 2 fingers on the trackpad. We'll drag it up and down. 2 fingers.
I'm using this. Thank you. So we've identified 12 items that more than likely are going to impact the budget next year and either use some of that $3,143,000 of identified additional resources, or increase it because, as you'll see, there's one item where we think the cost will go down next year. And so I'll just briefly give a quick update for clarity what each of these items represents. We don't know what the staffing cost will be for next year. Marie is close to getting that number, but last year's increase was 3.6%. So what I've done is I've taken last year's 3.6%, and that works out to $2,283,000 of new money in next year's budget.
I just want to jump in briefly because I saw some eyes open up wide. 3.6% is the total increase in that salary portion of the budget. The COLA baked into the contract is 2.5%. But there's also lane and step increases that occur as well, which is why the number 3.6 is higher than what the contractual negotiation would be at 2.5. I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. Is that understood? That was a omission on my part. Good, okay. There will be changes in FTE, no doubt. Enrollment driven, program driven. That's ongoing as part of the budget process when we tabulate all the requests from the program heads and make a presentation. That's a number that we can't even estimate. We have guidance that from the Health Insurance Trust that health insurance rates will go up by at least 10% next year based on the cost trend and based on the amount of reserves available to the trust. That 10% works out to just under $1 million cost increase. If you remember last year, we had an unusually high assessment from the Middlesex County Retirement System, which I proposed combining with OPEB and growing that combined cost by 6.5% for the foreseeable future, and that's what that works out to be this year. So we've moderated that increase of those two cost centers and by combining them. Special ed tuition, based on where we are this year, and that's all we have to go by is the students we serve now, and trying to estimate a budget that will run through June of 2023, I feel comfortable that we can reduce the tuition budget line by at least $100,000, and I'll focus, hopefully sometime in the future, I'll come back to what I meant by at least. The ed tech budget has been affected by the number of, among other things, the number of devices we've acquired through the pandemic. That and a reduction in the budget last year where we substituted grant funding. There's a need to restore that budget, and I've used $100,000. And there's no surprise that those two balance each other. They're mostly there so that we don't lose sight of the fact that there will be a need to do something with those two line items. There will be an incremental cost to open the Douglas and Gates schools at the new campus. We don't know what it is. When the breakdown is vetted, we'll have a number there. Those are things that are certain. The next category is program continuation. So 8 and 9 had been presented to you as a combination of using ESSER funds to phase out all-day K tuition and to phase in into the staffing additional staff members for the MTSS initiative. And those are the costs that were included this year and covered by ESSER funding that now go into the budget and will have to be funded locally next year. And item 10, the Capital Improvement Committee keeps track of the long-range capital improvement spending plan, which was a 13-year plan to ultimately raise the amount of annual spending on capital items to a level that they thought appropriate. We abrogated that 2 years ago because of the pending COVID pandemic. We restored $350,000 last year, $150,000 of it subsidized by the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund. What we're looking to do this year is to increase the new capital projects through appropriated dollars to $500,000 from $350,000. That would bring us back in total to about $1.4 million in capital, because there's about $900,000 associated with payment of the 10-year bond. And lastly, on this item 11, we last addressed this in FY20. It's the initiative to put certified library media specialists in the elementary buildings. To take one more step in that direction would be another $60,000, and again, that was based on numbers that were used in the FY20 budget presentation. The last item on here is anticipated that we will have to do some renovation to this building once pre-K moves out, and that, because it's not in the CIP plan, would be an incremental cost that if we move forward with any significant renovation, we'd have to score it on this in this analysis. And so, adding up, I could add up these things to the budget cost and come up with a number north of $100 million next year, but I think a simpler way to look at it is we had $3.1 million more resources available. That's what we're estimating. If we increase the budget by these items 1 through 12, with the understanding that there are 3 of them that don't have a number in there yet, we are $846,900, if you see that, over where the assessment is projected to be, where the towns are right now planning for their assessment for FY23. That last step might be a bit of a leap to get to. I think going through line by lines of revenues and expenses is easy to grasp. How we get to 846 and what that means, happy to answer questions if need be.
Okay. Oops. There we go. I just want to add one thing to that. What's not included on this worksheet, but we need you to be keeping track of, are some totals of different items carried under ComEd right now through their revolving accounts. ComEd does not have the resources to continue to carry $340,000 worth of utility, or $375,000 worth of utility costs and $340,000 worth of custodial costs. They just don't have the funding available. So we need to think about bringing some portion of that back into the operating budget. That would be in addition to what you see up here. It's just not quite shown on the sheet yet. This is an iterative process, so it's always changing.
All right, time for questions. Before we open up to questions, I do want to make one comment here, which is everything that we've looked at does not include initiatives like we spoke about last week, which would be the all-day kindergarten continuing to reduce that tuition. There are additional items here, and the point for having this view is so that we can look and make an informed decision about individual initiatives against the overall budget position. Dave wants to make a comment, and then I'm going to go to Kira to give one more kickoff as the chair of the budget committee, if you have any comments. Dave.
So you can see item 8, we are taking back into the budget the first year of the tuition phase out. Just want to make that clear. It's not that we're ignoring it. It's not that there's but if we want to go beyond that, then you're correct.
Thank you. That's what Kira was going to say. Questions? Amy.
Can you explain the incremental cost to opening the Boardwalk campus? Because my understanding that everything would be covered under the big bond that we took out.
There are energy costs actually associated with that. There's going to be some custodial costs as well because it's a much bigger facility than we have at either Douglas or Gates. So energy costs, you know, my initial understanding of it, and this is what we have JD trying to zero in on right now, new buildings use significantly more electricity. Now, we have a net zero building planned, but none of the solar panels can be constructed until after we demolish the parking lots, which is the current Gates School. So I think we're chasing the utility costs by about a year. So that it's just, we'll have more information, but I think that's the crux of it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Evelyn?
So I'm just curious about the ComEd cost that you mentioned, Peter. Why, is it because they're not open, like folks are not patronizing? Like why are we projecting that we'll have additional costs or some of their costs will come into the budget?
Yeah, there was a number of years ago, community education had an extremely large surplus that they were running in their accounts on an annual basis. We know that there are costs associated with community education in terms of using custodial services, using electricity and other utilities like heat. So a number of years ago, the district had shifted some of the costs out of the traditional operating budget into the ComEd reserves. However, the costs shifted were partly based on how much utility and custodial costs they used, but also it was a function of there were a lot of reserves available that could reduce the impact on the operating budget. Since COVID, ComEd's revenue streams have, you know, really taken a nosedive, whether it's extended day, the adult ed classes that they run, community basketball, they're not back at that enrollment level that they've been seeing in the past. And so we can't continue to draw on their reserves to the same level that we have. Anything else on that, Dave, or is that okay?
So I was watching a YouTube video yesterday about the new solar battery or whatever we have in the high school, and there was some reference to excess revenue that might be coming from that. How does that factor into all this, and where does that revenue go? Is that possible that we use some of that revenue to offset the all-day K tuition and roll it out next year? Just curious.
So the assumption is that energy savings from initiatives like that will reduce the utility bill. And again, there's a lead time to realize those savings, but those JD typically bakes those into his budget estimates for his department.
Or is that something we can leverage going forward towards all-day kindergarten? I mean, I'm just trying to think based on the conversation we had last school meeting about where we're gonna find revenue from, instead of doing it over a period of time where we're gonna find the revenue from to roll this out. Is it possible that the savings that are realized from that could then be applied towards making sure that we're realizing this dream of all-day kindergarten?
So here's a way to look at that. We are going to continue to refine items 1 through 12, no doubt add to them, possibly change what's there. When the facilities budget request is submitted, it'll be interesting for me to see how JD applies his anticipated revenue, and I would say it's in the 50 to 100,000, from what I understand, range. It's not that big number in pink. It's got 1 too few zeros. But if in presenting his budget, that allows him to reduce his budget ask for next year. The other thing that this does, and this is now getting into budget weeds, everything else is assumed to be level funded. So if you get something of significance like the facilities budget driven by a significant drop in utility costs, forget about item, the one with the new building, forget about item 7, that's set, but the energy costs of the existing buildings. Now that's additional revenue that would be available to fund something, and the all-day K tuition removal initiative would be one of those somethings. It would be competing with other things. Anything that we find of significance that reduces a department's ask from the preceding year is found money the way this works. It's additional resources for next year's budget. Does that understand? Okay.
Just one thing I'm going to caution on this budget in particular, where we are looking at, we're in a unique circumstance, at least since I've been here, where in many years we're actually starting with a surplus and figuring out what we're going to do in different categories. Where we're starting with a relatively large deficit projection, I would caution against saying we can find revenue in one place and then apply it to a specific target, because there's a large pie left over that then doesn't get addressed. And I think, the first goal we have is to figure out how to close some deficits, and then strategically think about what we need to do in terms of shifting resources around to try and then realize some strategic goals as well. But I think from our standpoint, it's going to be hard to think about where, we can say, look, we're going to, if 180,000 isn't enough for the committee to put into this year's budget, you can tell us, we want you to put 360,000 in, but then the number at the bottom goes up by 180,000 that we then have to figure out other ways to work through. And I think what we're trying to do is, in this budget, we want to address strategic needs on an individual basis, and you're going to see we're going to present them to you so that you can clearly see what we're doing. But we then have to figure out what that means for the rest of the operating budget. So I just want to caution against thinking one thing over here means we can do something else over there. The only exception to that might be, say for like example with library media, if we add a licensed library media specialist to a school, that means we do not need the assistants that might be in that role now, because they actually are fulfilling the same thing. So you're shifting the cost from one specific role to another. That might be an area where you can think one-to-one, but overall in the big picture, I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
I want to make sort of two high-level points. One is, I love the way that Dave organized this. It's like revenues are revenues. We're going to talk about how much money we have, not whether it's going over here or over there. It's just revenues. And I would strongly encourage the committee, if people want to talk about revenues, to talk about revenues and not engage in sort of an earmarking discussion that said, I found something over here, so I want to apply it to this. That's just not a good process from my point of view. And then the second thing, to the pain point of this budget, the way these numbers, flow through, the Acton's finances right now, not only is this negative, but it's sitting negative, on the Acton ALG sheet. So that, and then as a reminder, if we want more money from the town of Acton, we could have a discussion about this, but this basically means we would need to go back and ask for an override. And given lots of different factors, that seems to me to be not a very reasonable idea for this particular budget. So with that being said, I think people do need to look at the expense side and see it. There's nothing on this list, no individual thing that we can't do. We could do any of those things, but we can't do all of those things. And so people are really going to have to think about, I really want to do this, and then you also then will have to say, and I'm willing to give up that. That's the kind of budget it's going to be.
Thanks, John. I'll follow that up and sort of comment to the committee that to make those decisions, somebody's not going to be happy. So we just have to be prepared to have those difficult conversations and pick our priorities and make the tough decisions. I'll also point out, since John shared the sort of the perspective from the Acton point of view, I have cautioned my fellow FinCom members in Boxborough to pay close attention, because this is a significant assessment increase for us. Granted, the number is smaller than Acton's, but considering both our increase in student enrollment in the district and the increase to the budget, it does mean something pretty significant to the town of Boxborough as well. Dave.
Thank you. One last word, just from an overview standpoint. This is a tough budget, and so to do nothing and just bring forward a $800,000 add, instead of cutting it and coming back to zero, adding it to the budget would be 5.2% to the assessment, 4.5% to Acton and 8.5% to Boxborough. There's nothing on here. Look at the expense side. There's nothing on here that's earth-shatteringly unusual. Assuming that the personnel comes in close to what it did last year, we'll identify changes in FTE. That number might be a decrease. The 10%, and look at all, skip over the next number and look at the rest of them. The phase out of the all-day K tuition, that's a little out of the ordinary, but that's, some would say, the bill has come due for what has happened in the district for many years, and that's part of that payment. But $1 million of new money to go to health insurance premiums. It was only 3 years ago that number was about half with a minus sign in front of it. We in 3 years in a row had an increase of 0, a decrease of 3%, a decrease of 5%. That was fantastic. Budgets are easy to assemble when a big driver like that is negative from year to year. Well, that bill has come due as well. And the last thing is reserves, because even though we had success with health insurance and other things like special education tuition, which has not skyrocketed, but which has moderated, we got way out on the branch for using reserves. From when I got here, the normal amount was $200,000. Well, we're $1 million more than that now. And so to bring that back and pay the additional health insurance in 1 year, it's going to look like this out of the box. So it's not something where people should say, what are we doing differently? Well, we're not doing anything differently. We're still paying people's health insurance. We still have reserves in the bank. The health insurance is what it is, and the reserves we're trying to save for the future when they may have to go up to that level again. So just 2 cents worth in that.
Thanks, Dave. All right. Now that we've set the stage for this, are we ready to move on to discuss ongoing business like our school calendar? Yes. All right. Thank you, Dave. So this is the first read of our proposed calendar for the 2022-2023 school year, and is similar in start date and with the same number of no school days as our current calendar. Like I said, this is a first read, so we will have a second read and a vote. We're expecting to do that at our next school committee meeting on December 17th. Comments and questions from the public can be sent to the school committee email abrsc@abschools.org by December 10th. I'm going to hand it over to Peter to give us a quick description of what we've got on the calendar for this year. We'll then open it up to comments and questions from the committee and then the public.
All right, so thank you, Adam. So just a very, very quick history here. My first year here, the school committee asked the district to convene a calendar subcommittee to study the school calendar and make recommendations back to the full committee. Marie Altieri led that process. They considered a whole variety of information, including holidays starting before and after Labor Day, when did we want to end school with the relative school year, what did vacations look like, and there was a series of recommendations sent. I'm happy to actually forward that link to you. I found it today in the 2019 packet or 2018 packet. So maybe Beth, if you could add that to the list to send to the committee. But the recommendations that came out of that we've had in place for several years. So in developing the first read of this calendar, we used the recommendations that came from that subcommittee to do that. The important thing to understand is we are required to have state and federal holidays off. The federal holiday of Juneteenth is now on this calendar. I know you voted it for our current year. Because that is a federal holiday, we must observe it. The same is true for other federal holidays, such as Thanksgiving, Christmas is actually a federal holiday, which is a weird one because it is, you know, considered a religious holiday, but it's also a federal holiday. And there are some other things as well. So other reasons that schools can choose to have holidays, it's important to note we cannot take holidays off for religious purposes, but we can take them off for secular purposes. And specifically, one of the reasons would be if you anticipate that you're going to have a low attendance day. That would be a reason that people would do that. So I know during the calendar subcommittee process, that was actually something that had been studied and came up in discussion. So happy to hear comments on this. Our goal is to hear some feedback on it, be able to come back with any revisions that you want to see and be able to move forward. So,
Thanks, Peter. Tessa.
I'll just add that I sat on the calendar subcommittee, and the last thing that Peter just noted was what ultimately came up, because we had that discussion about Jewish holidays and about Good Friday and the things that we do have. What? We did discuss Chinese New Year as well, and that guiding principle of there has to be like a secular educational reason, is what we said at the time, was not in effect for the other holidays. There have been surveys that went out to, there were surveys at the time that went out to the community asking, if you celebrate this holiday, do you plan on taking the day off? Not like, if it was a day off, would you be happy? But if it is important to your family, do you take that day off? And that was asked of staff as well as families. And the recommendations that came forward from that committee came up with the current calendar as we have it now, because the days that are considered religious holidays that are on here, the Jewish holidays and Good Friday, there was a significant response from both the community and the staff that we would have low attendance. And so on days where that was mostly staff, we would never be able to get that many substitutes in to be able to cover the number of classes. And with students, obviously low attendance. So I just want to highlight that for everybody, because I know that the discussion can be really heated. And at the time when we had the calendar discussion originally, we had lots of Jewish community members coming forward and, asking that we have those holidays off. And here in our communities, there was a significant, we would have experienced significant loss of either staff or students for those days off. So anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Evelyn?
But we haven't sent out another survey recently, right? Because when was this committee convened?
It was not that long ago. It was when Peter started. It was 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
And we said we weren't. We said at the time that we had put the Jewish community through a lot, and they were tired of having to keep coming forward, because there's been a significant Jewish community here. So, can you turn your microphone off?
Sure.
There's been a significant Jewish community here since I grew up here. The synagogue here in particular has always been a significant part of the community. And so that was the driving force behind that. But the committee, when we had it, looked at Diwali. They looked at Chinese New Year. And we did look at all of those things, and those were asked in, I believe the Muslim holidays were asked too. It was 2018, 2019. It was not that long ago. And I know that our student rep said that 50% of our student population is a population of color, and that's not really true. Like it's more like 30% of Asian, if you include everybody, but that's not, we're talking about Diwali right now, right? So 50% of the population does not celebrate Diwali. I mean, maybe in the preschool, it looks like that could be the case, but I'm not sure.
But from an equity standpoint, what does the committee want to do from equity lens? I understand that, I respect that, we may have more Jewish people than Muslim people or Indian people or Chinese people, whatever, but how can we think about a calendar that is equitable across our community and make sure that, because the reason why I ask that is that there has been a conversation around, when a kid takes another holiday, maybe let's say a Muslim kid takes a holiday, takes their Eid, or new content cannot be taught in class. Well, we have not been able to uphold that rule, and I can testify because I have Muslim kids. I am Catholic, by the way, but I have Muslim kids, and I know that new content has been taught, and that we have not been able to uphold that bargain for those kids to not come to school behind. So from an equity standpoint, what are we going to do as a committee to have a committee that, a calendar that is representative of our community and serves everyone? I know we can have every holiday, and I'm not asking for like every religious holiday on this calendar, and maybe it's a phasing process, that maybe Chinese New Year or Eid is not on this year, but we're gonna have a process where we switch it around. I don't know what it is, but we have to come up with something that satisfies everyone.
Adam, can I just respond to that real quickly? Or maybe
I just wanted to see if, Marie, you wanted to make a comment before I want to give you that
I just wanted to
opportunity.
add a little bit to what Tessa said. The calendar had been studied in 2012, 2013, 2016, 2018. 2018, there was a report. We will share that with the committee. The other piece of it is that the biggest absences for students are the late June days. The biggest absences for staff across the whole year are June days. And the biggest priority outlined in the survey by all groups was not to go too late in June. So I'm not proposing solutions here. I understand it's a difficult question. I'm just saying that as you look at the proposed calendar and then we looked out at next year, it could be even later. When you get into June 20-something, you really do lose a lot.
Thanks, Marie. Before we continue, I do want to speak to Evelyn's comment around equity, because one of the things that we did purposefully this year was to remove the actual name of a religious holiday from the main page of the calendar where we're saying if there's school or no school. I know it's not a lot, but it was a first step towards symbolically and equally representing all of the holidays in one place so that everybody could see them in one place and not calling out a specific religious holiday on the main calendar, the district where we're seeing those days that are off, that we're calling them specifically no school days as opposed to whatever religious holiday may be at that day. Like I said, I recognize that it's not all the way there, but it was a doable first step, and at least put the lens of equity across how we're presenting the material in the calendar. With that, I'll go over to John.
Yes, I thought Marie's comment, particularly about the objective with regard to the end of the school year, was important. And, you know, every year when the calendar is constructed, just because of the way the year happens to be, you know, that drives some of the decision making. And I wondered if you could briefly tell us, you know, when, you know, how it was arrived at, how the beginning of the calendar was set.
So again, we'll share the report with you, but there were definitely a lot of reasons why having it start before Labor Day was preferable. And we have 2 staff days before students start, and we've worked with the ABEA very collaboratively, and they have agreed that we can have the 2 staff days the week before school starts, as long as it's not before August 25th. And so that's a guiding factor, which next year is going to become something to talk about. But so we have 2 staff days, and then so in this case, we're able to have the staff on the Thursday, Friday of the week before students, which means students can start on a Monday. And then we have some of the grades don't start on the first day, they start on the second day. So we get mostly a full week. The Friday before Labor Day by contract is a no school day. And that is in the contract. And again, we surveyed lots of people and that was preferred. Is that what you were asking, John?
Yeah, and I think you said it, but just to be clear, the way this particular year broke was relatively friendly to the way you started up the school year?
Marie, you probably know the answer to this question, but I was wondering, rather than surveying students and teachers about what they would take off, if we could look at the absence information that we have from the last few years, and if there are any days that stand out as being holidays or other days where the absence rates are high for staff or students? I know you mentioned the end of June. Those aren't around holidays. I'm guessing it's toward the end of the school
So
year.
that data is in the report.
Okay, great.
I just want to speak to what Evelyn said about equity, and we really have two issues here, as we do with so many things, policy and procedure. We can't legally take off a religious holiday unless there's a secular reason to take it off. And so the policy is that we don't have, there's not supposed to be work, homework, new content, what have you. I mean, that's always been the policy. The procedure is that the teachers are supposed to do that. And I don't disagree with you in any capacity that that's not being done. But it isn't the policy. And so I don't, if we had a full school year and we didn't take off summer the way we do here, you know, if we did it like in North Carolina, how they have, you know, an all-year school year, then maybe like the secular reason for taking days off would just be that we need mental health days every once in a while. I don't know, you know what I mean? But there's 180 days of school, and the more we take off, it's not about, at least from my perspective, and after sitting on that committee for all of those months that we sat and looked at the data and looked at the number of days that people take off and looked at the days that they do take off and everything else, it's not, and what we came to at the end of that is that it wasn't a discussion about one religious holiday over another. It was simply looking at the days in which we could hold school and not be missing either a significant contingent of students or need a significant contingent of substitutes to cover teachers for those reasons. And so that's how we decided. And my understanding, and I went back and read Desi's guidance on this, is that there has to be a secular reason to take a religious holiday off. And according to the data that we gathered, just looking at attendance of students and teachers, there isn't that data to support having the other holidays off, which, like I said, we looked at them. But that's all I'll say about it. The equity has to be in the procedure of, it has to be, the teachers have to carry it out, if that's the policy.
Is there any reason to think that the numbers would change significantly if we looked at it again now?
I mean, I honestly don't think from 2018 to now, you're going to see a big difference. We could do that, but it's also been done several times.
Marie, can I jump in? I have to make this discussion a little, I hate to do this, but I got to make this a little bit more complex for everyone. When we surveyed families, it wasn't a clear delineation that Good Friday was the top, the Jewish holidays were the second, and then, you know, Diwali and Lunar New Year were 3 and 4. It actually came out in a very different order. There were more families saying that they were requesting Lunar New Year and Diwali off, I believe, than some of the other holidays. Is that correct, Maria? No? I thought it was like 10%, 9%.
That's true for Lunar New Year, not for Diwali. So Diwali was 5%, and the Jewish holidays and Good Friday were roughly 10%, as well as Lunar New Year. But the staffing piece, so Diwali for students was 5%, and for staff was 0 absences. And one of the things we looked at was what is celebrated during the day and what is celebrated not during the day. So if it is a holiday that's required to be specifically during the school day or not, that seemed to be a factor in the data as well of who would take the day off for the holiday.
When we say we have to have a secular reason, what do we mean by that? I apologize, I don't know, but I'm just like trying to understand what that means.
So, I guess I just have to do it twice every time. So the information I have is actually was from information provided to Concord Carlisle. And basically it talks, there's what's written in like mass general laws and federal laws, but then the courts also have case law that gets dictated, which may not appear in a law, but the courts have litigated it. So basically what courts do is the quote, I'll just read it, is courts looking at the constitutionality of religious holidays have applied a three-pronged test. Number one, the closure must have a, quote, clearly secular, end quote, and not merely a religious purpose. Two, the closure must not have a principal or primary effect of advancement or inhibition of a religion. And three, the closure must not result in excessive entanglement between church and state. Those are the three real decisions. So, and those are based on Supreme Court and Circuit Court decisions. So that's really what they mean. I don't know as though there's real clarity around what that means when you develop a school calendar, but that is the guidance that was provided.
All right. I'll just, I think I'll add that it is our decision as this body to choose and to help set that calendar. So in some ways we get to identify the secular reason to have any day off. But I would also caution you to look at the end of the calendar that's presented to us right now and think about what happens if we have 3 snow days. And that means that we have, or 2 snow days, and we have to come back for one day after a long weekend of celebrating Juneteenth. I think that would be a really detrimental thing because we'd essentially lose that one day. I also want to recognize that, to Evelyn's point earlier, without a diverse workforce, we're never going to see the requests from the employees to take other more culturally diverse holidays or have the absences that might occur from that. So I think that's something also that we need to recognize. And then I'll invite the members of the public here who have waited very patiently to come speak with us. And as they come forward, I'll just remind everybody that we did get a great number of emails over the past few days around this topic as well. And you're going to need to turn that mic back on.
Hello, do I need a mic? Okay, I guess we do. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. Dear school committee, happy 4th day of Hanukkah. It makes me so happy to see that our district is moving towards equity. If we take pride in living in a diverse community, we have to be willing to do the work to support and celebrate the needs of all its community members. 4 years ago, I stood before you and appealed to recognize Diwali as a holiday in the school calendar so that the children in our schools feel included and represented. For children like my daughter to belong and to feel that their Indian culture means something. You listened to me patiently and agreed to include the holiday in the calendar, but not give the day off. In these past 4 years, putting Diwali on the calendar, but not giving the day off has eclipsed the beauty of this festival of lights, which we would like to celebrate with everybody around us. Even today, most people in our town remain ignorant about Diwali. I noticed that on November 18th of this year, you voted for an early release day on December 23rd to recognize the stress for our students and staff, to recognize the stress our students and staff have been under and provide some extra family time. I'm asking for the school committee to spread the holiday cheer around and not just during the end of the year. Why not allocate one day from the winter break for Diwali? Diwali is an extremely joyous but also a stressful time for many in our district. And it would go a long way in recognizing that and giving our students time to celebrate with their families and include the whole district in this celebration. I was so pleased to hear from Rohan, our student body, with so eloquent manner. He explained what Diwali means to not just him, but to people around him. Many students and their families postpone their Diwali celebration to the next weekend. What if we take a moment and pause and think about if all of us had to postpone Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Hanukkah celebration until the following weekend? Some school districts in Massachusetts, like Boxborough and Lexington, do give the day off Diwali. I'm asking for representation, empathy, and inclusion, so we can all feel more united and less segregated. Whatever you decide, though, my respect for you will not diminish. In my culture, the educators I held in the highest of esteem, even before the parents. It was heartwarming to hear from our student body about their concerns. I am proud of them and our district. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to subcommittee and member reports. First item on that agenda is a report from the Policy Committee. Nora.
Oh, sorry, thank you. We are looking at two different policies tonight that are up, I think, both for second read for the service animals and third read for comfort animals. We received some feedback and made a couple of changes to policies, so they're in the packet, and just open for any feedback or comments that we have, and hopefully a vote.
Any feedback or comments on the file IMGA, Service Animals in School? If not, we'll welcome a motion to approve the new Service Animals in School policy.
So moved.
I move to approve the new Service Animals in School policy, file IMGA.
All right, we're going to say that Ben seconded that because he nodded at me. Ben seconded that and Amy made the motion. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'm going to abstain from that one. Nora.
Great. Next, we have the comfort animals in school policy, which you'll see the changes to this policy made in red in your packet, which thank you very much for the feedback, Tessa. We were able, hopefully, to make it much more clear and straightforward the way that it's worded now. So any feedback or comments on that?
All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve file number IMGB for comfort animals in our schools.
All right, Ben motioned and Amy seconded on that one. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're going to skip over the budget update for just a second, and we're going to skip to community engagement. Andrew.
Thanks, Adam. The Acton Boxborough Regional School District School Committee Community Engagement Subcommittee met on November 19th, and topics discussed included the subcommittee's high-level goals, community outreach methods, and our next steps. Our outreach methods to develop guidelines for developing an engagement policy to align public meeting and information sharing, a review of similar policy implementations from other districts. The committee will coordinate with policy subcommittee to define requirements, and neither the district nor the committee has clear research regarding on how our community consumes information, what kind of information, or how best support the distribution of information. So our next steps will be to connect with the policy committee regarding a social media policy that can be encompassing, create a research plan for audience measurement and activity, and collect requirements based on research for communication engagements platforms. As always, our meeting follows the next day from these. And that is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, budget update. Do you have any additional updates, Kira? All right, so Kira said that we covered everything in depth earlier this evening. So that moves us on to our consent agenda. Items on that consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion. I'll read each item name, and if any member would like it held, please say hold. Item 1, approval of the ABRSC meeting minutes of November 18th, 2021. Item 2, approval of gift of a piano to the Gates School. Item 3, the approval of a donation of $8,000 from the Friends of Acton Libraries to the ABRSD Libraries. And item number 4, the approval of donations valued over $1,000 from the Conant PTO. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? All right, so we had Kira moving and Ginny seconded that. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Statement of warrants and a recommendation to approve. Do I have a volunteer to read the warrants? Thank you, John.
I move that the school committee vote to approve payroll warrants as follows. Number P2211 dated 11/18/2021 in the amount of $2,856,497.02. Payroll deduction warrants as follows. Number 22-011 PR dated 11/18/2021 in the amount of $1,167,210.75. Vendor warrants as follows. Number 22-010 dated 11/10/2021 in the amount of $804,680.10.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Ms. McKinley. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is also unanimous. Peter, anything on the FYI you would like to highlight for the committee?
I would just note there is an EDCO annual report in your packet that was based on last year's operations. So it was trying to duly recognize a lot of the successes of EDCO and its students, but also simultaneously kind of lay bare the dire financial straits that EDCO was in, which led to its closure. So I wanted to include that for you, and after that, I do not have anything, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Tessa moved to adjourn. Ginny seconded that. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That's unanimous.